Hello folks, this is Rocky Red Panda, host of the Artist Show. Now we're going to go have some fun. We're going to go see some sights and we're going to do some things in this lovely video. So where we end up, who knows? But I think I have an idea. We're going to go enjoy the best of what Franklin County has to offer. I'm going to spend the next few days checking out lovely Franklin County, and we'll see. So I am at the James Buchanan Birthplace National Park or Memorial, however you want to call it, outside here in Fort Loudoun, Pennsylvania. A little history lesson about James Buchanan. James Buchanan was the first and only president from Pennsylvania. What I mean by first, as in the only president from Pennsylvania. Now, he was president of the United States before the Civil War. Now, he really was not a good president, as most people would say. He really didn't do much as president. He only made room for when Abraham Lincoln took over the reins. He was the only president to have not been married in his White House time, which, you think about it, pretty cool. Now, he was a fantastic lawyer, but he lacked as president. Now, in front of us here is the James Buchanan Memorial Park. Now, this is a lovely mausoleum, or this is a memorial. He is not buried here. This was built in his honor. Now notice that it looks like almost like a Masonic style building. The monument itself behind here was erected and helped built by Harriet Rebecca Lane, youngest daughter of James Buchanan's sister. Now this monument was purchased on 18.5 acres of land, which is this lovely park around us, and started in 1906. Construction on the monument didn't begin until 1907. Now, the monument itself was finished March 22nd, 1911, and donated to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, making this the first gift of land to the state park system. This monument is to mark the birthplace of James Buchanan himself. Now, this James Buchanan Birthplace Park is again located outside of Fort Loudoun, Pennsylvania, or if you want to call it Mercersburg, because Mercersburg is really James Buchanan, and it looks amazing. It's his very historical town, home to Mercersburg Academy. But there's a lot of other things to do inside Mercersburg. I wish I could take you to Mercersburg today, but we have a long list of things we have to do for this video, so we're just going to continue on. And let's head to our next location. But before we do, I just want to show you this. As you can see, look at all this lovely scenery, including this river. I think this is very fitting for Mr. James Buchanan. All right, you guys, we're at our next location. Now, mind, I have a little cheat sheet here. We're at Fort Loudoun, which is in the village of Fort Loudoun. It is a provincial British fortification. Fort Loudoun was built in 1756 when the county settlers were British subjects. It was the supply base for the British during the campaign to oust the French from Fort Duquesne, which is in Pittsburgh. What is noted as the site of colonial rebellion by James Smith and the Black Boys, which is basically inspired the 1939 classic Allegheny Uprising with John Wayne. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at this fort. It looks like it may not be open, but we can definitely walk around the outside. We'll talk a little bit more about what it would have been like back in the 1756. Alright, so following the defeat of General Everett Braddock's army of British and colonial forces during the Battle of Monticello on July 9th, 1755, the Pennsylvania-Maryland frontier became vulnerable to Indian raids launched from the French Fort Duquesne, which is now Pittsburgh. You should know that by Point Park. And the Delaware village, Kittening. I'm actually reading off of this little thing down here because this is interesting. Now, Indian raids against Conecuh Valley began in the fall of 1755, and over the next 3 years, the local population was terrorized by killings and the attacks on perhaps as many as 400 settlers. Yes, in addition to many small private settlements, forts that were erected in the region. Fort Loudoun was constructed in November 1756 to replace the nearby Fort McDowell as a supply depot and to provide protection for local settlers. Now, you have to think about that. This is during the French and Indian War. George Washington was fighting with the British at the time. He was a small commander. He wasn't as big. And of course, we all know what happens to Colonel Braddock. So we do not need to talk about that history. But during the summer and fall of 1758, though, the fort served as a depot for supplies for Forbes' campaign and as a staging area for British and provincial units marching west. It later served as an important communication link along the Forbes Road during Pontiac's Rebellion of 1763. In 1765, James Smith, a local resident, led a group of settlers to stop the shipment of Indian trade goods and ammunition by unsurplusing traders despite direct British orders against it. Several confrontations occurred, which forced the eventual British withdrawal from the fort in November of that year. So, this action by Smith and the settlers of the Conecuh is often considered one of the first acts of resistance that led to the American Revolution in 1775. I just want you to think on that. A rebellion happening way before the American Revolution, right about the time of the French and Indian War. This fort back here, which is probably a reproduction, is what the fort would have looked like. Unfortunately, I cannot go inside, but a little bit of French and Indian War history, which I think is pretty interesting. Now, who were the people that taught the Indians how to scalp? The British. The British taught them that lovely trade by taking a little hatchet and going right above the head. You were lucky if you survived a Indian scalping. Now, I was going to take you to the first location, but unfortunately that is closed for the season. It opens up in a few weeks. But what happened there was a headmaster and 11 of his school children were scalped to death by Delawarean Indians, a total of 4. And during that heated battle, only one survived because he was able to duck his head into cold spring water, which is nearby, and that's how he was able to survive. Now, the headmaster himself pleaded for the release of the children, but the Indians said no. The Indians basically scalped him and scalped all of his 11 children as well, minus one who would be able to survive that horrible massacre. But this brings to light about history of the French and Indian War, and of course this area, what we call Franklin County. So let's continue on our tour, and let's go check out some more cool spots. The next location we're going to be headed to is right down from Fort Loudoun. It's a city called Chambersburg, Pennsylvania. Now Chambersburg by itself is an historic city. But let's talk a little bit about what we know about Chambersburg. The most famous is, of course, you have the burning of Chambersburg, which happened during the Civil War. They came back up from Virginia, the Confederates did, and they burnt down Chambersburg. So some of the things actually survived, including a jail, which we will try to get into today. Now, that jail was where they held some of the people that did John Brown's raid. Now, they were able to catch them before they made their way down to Harper's Ferry. And then right next door, or down the road from that, is the house where John Brown would keep some of his ammunitions and supplies and whatnot before doing John Brown's raid. They restored that house into a beautiful historic landmark. So we'll try to go in and check that out as well. So welcome to Chambersburg, Pennsylvania. But let's do a little history lesson here. We're standing on the site of the homecoming, which is the statue that you see in front. It's called Chambers Fort. Now, Chambers Fort was American Revolution joined June 1775 after skirmishers at Lexington and Concord. The Continental Congress authorized the formation of the first American Army. Franklin County volunteers under the leadership of Captain James Chambers, son of the founder, formed Company A of Thompson's Rifle Battalion and joined with other Pennsylvania companies for the 450-mile march to Boston. Accompanying Captain James Chambers was his 11-year-old son, Benjamin, who fought alongside the men of Company A at the Battle of Bunker Hill and throughout the Eastern campaigns of the American Revolution. Now, the statue that you see here in front of me was dedicated in 2007, excuse me, which is pretty cool. It talks about the homecoming of those men who came back fighting for American freedom and rights. Area where I'm currently at, this area where the statue is the location of Fort Chambersburg, which was a fort built by Benjamin Chambersburg. He was the founder of it. Now, I showed a little video before this, a clip of a water wheel. That is a reproduction of the original water wheel that Benjamin would have used at this location. It's pretty cool. School? I'm not in school, but I'm schooling you. It's a pretty cool location to be at. Very historic, because all of this is right in my backyard. And now I'm playing tacky tours for the day, but I'm also showing you some cool places to visit. So when you're in Chambersburg, make sure you stop by the area of Fort Chambersburg, visit the statue. It's a cool thing to see. But let's travel on, shall we? To visit a place in Chambersburg called the John Brown House. But unfortunately, the house was not open today, which is quite okay. But I'll give you a little history. I did take some video that you saw. intermingled. Now, the John Brown house is a boarding house where John Brown stayed on his way down to Harper's Ferry. Pretty cool to think that he stayed at that boarding house. And they redid the boarding house and renovated the house to look exactly as it did back during John Brown's time in the 1800s, which is pretty cool. Now, if you know a little bit about John Brown, you know about John Brown's raid. Now, he was the first person. He was an abolitionist, but not really an abolitionist. He was more of a one of those radical abolitionist people that decided let's try to use the force of can't think right now. My brain is dead. Use force, yeah, brute force, exactly. Use brute force weapons and fight for freedoms and arm all of the slaves, free and not free, which is what he did. And then he made his attack on Harper's Ferry, as you know, and he was stuck in what you call the arms house, the armory, and he held himself up, and then he was caught and hanged. That's a little brief story of John Brown's raid. So this house in Chambersburg plays somewhat a partial role in that whole escapade, where this is where he stayed, and this is where he boarded on his way to Harper's Ferry. Pretty cool. Okay, so we got one more place we're gonna check out. It's been on a list of things that I wanted to see. It's not really in Franklin County, but we're gonna add it to this list anyways. I'm gonna leave it as a little surprise. Now, this is a little bit of history. Now, for those that don't know Civil War history, I'm gonna be learning something as well along with you guys. So we're gonna go check out a little secret place that not many people know. So let's go have fun. So we are here at a place called Monterey Pass. Now, this was a very confusing battle that took place on the evening of July the 4th, 1863, during the Confederates' retreat back to Virginia. As is foretold, on the evening of July the 4th, 1863, one of the most confusing battles of the American Civil War occurred, known as the Battle of Monterey Pass. Around 9 p.m., Union cavalry under the command of General Judson Kilpatrick came in contact with Confederate 1st Army Cavalry, Maryland, Company B, under Captain George Emack. Captain Emack had a small detail guarding the approach to Monterey Pass, reinforced by one cannon from Captain Tanner's battery. Exactly. Darkness set in during a blinding thunderstorm when the Confederate artillerists opened fire upon the Union cavalry. As the confusion subsided, the Confederates charged, pushing Kilpatrick back. The Confederates fell back to Red Run, where the battle would be waged for several hours. Throughout the night, the battle was carried out in between flashes of lightning and muzzle flashes. Fighting spilled over to Fairfield Gap, as well as Latorsburg, Maryland. By 3:30 a.m. on July the 5th, the Union cavalry successfully reached the turnpike where a Confederate wagon train was located, capturing and destroying 7 miles worth of wagons and taking 1,000 prisoners as they moved towards Ringgold, Maryland. At Latorsburg, another 2 miles worth of wagons were destroyed and several hundred prisoners were taken. The Union cavalry lost 75 men during the battle. By dawn, the battle was over, and the Confederate army continued using Monterey Pass as part of its retreat from Gettysburg. The Union cavalry moved to Smithsburg, Maryland, where they were attacked by Confederate General Jeb Stuart. From there, the Union cavalry fell back to Boonesboro, Maryland, where they arrived shortly after midnight on July the 6th, 1863. So this was a battle that took place during the retreat of the Confederates from Gettysburg on July the 4th. As you can see there in the back, that is their museum. Of course, the museum is not open, but you have a little trail, as you can see where my fingers are pointing, right back there, where you have the playground area. And that is the Monterey Pass Trail. Now, it will take you during this confusing battle of what exactly happened here. This plays a small, crucial role in the Confederate retreat from Gettysburg. Even though it seemed that it was a Union victory and he destroyed a lot of wagons, still, this is a battle that's worth remembering. Now remember, the Union trailed in victory, and they were able to capture 1,300 Confederate prisoners and destroying a lot of their wagons. Now that is something the Union trailed for, but as you know, this would play their downfall as the Confederates would slowly lose the Civil War itself, because Gettysburg was a crucial point. Once they lost Gettysburg, they would be slowly falling down like dominoes. Well, of course, I think we know how the Civil War ended. You know, Sherman, as we know, went down. He did a lot of ravaging and pillaging. Grant did the push and shove movement. And it ended with the signing of a document in Appomattox Court, Virginia, with General E. Lee signing the other side. We had a fantastic day. This is what I call the Weekend Travelers 2.0. As in, I haven't done it in a while, but this is pretty cool. We checked out some of the sites to see in Franklin County. We didn't check them all out because there's a lot more to see and do. I just did a few of the highlights, and we even got food along the way. So, with all else, you know, have fun during your travel, because this is something you can do in a day, and you can see all the things I saw. You know, check out the links and visit their websites and all that good stuff. And with all else, think outside the bus. Until next time.